Vote on Heather Higginbottom to be Deputy White House Budget Director. There are, of course, news reports that former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi has been killed, and there may be related floor speeches in the Senate today. Now live to the Senate floor here on C-SPAN 2.
The Senate will come to order. The chaplain, Dr. Barry Black, will lead the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. Eternal Lord God, your infinite greatness compels us to give you praise. Today, we ask that you would help our senators to reach their full ethical stature by deepening their sense of the stewardship of all that they have and are by the power of your Spirit within them. Lord, our challenging times demand such ethical and moral fitness so that problems can be solved with a collaborative and courageous spirit. Like streams of flowing water through our common days, you continue to refresh us with your merciful goodness. Make us worthy of your generosity as we strive daily to please and honor you. We pray in your holy name. Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., October 20th, 2011. To the Senate. Under provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Tom Udall, a senator from the state of New Mexico, to perform the duties of the chair, son Daniel K. Inouye, President pro tempore.
Mr. President,
Majority Whip is recognized.
following leader remarks, the Senate will resume consideration of H.R. 2112, the Agriculture, CJS, and Transportation Appropriation Bill. At noon, there will be 3 roll call votes. The first vote will be on the confirmation of Heather Higginbottom to be Deputy Director of OMB. The second vote will be in relation to the Vitter Amendment, and the third vote will be in relation to the Webb Amendment. The filing deadline for first-degree amendments to the substitute amendment and H.R. 2112 is 1 p.m. today. There will be another series of up to 4 roll call votes at approximately 2 p.m. in relation to additional amendments to the bill. Further roll call votes are expected during today's session in order to complete action on the bill. We also hope to vote on the confirmation of the nomination of John Bryson to be Commerce Secretary as well today. Additionally, cloture was filed on the motions to proceed to S-1723 and S-1726, and if no agreement is reached, those cloture votes will occur on Friday.
Mr. President.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of H.R. 2112, which the clerk will report.
Calendar number 155, H.R. 2112, an act making appropriations for agriculture, rural development, Food and Drug Administration, and related agencies programs for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2012, and for other purposes.
Senator from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I just want to thank my colleagues for bringing amendments to the floor on the agriculture bill and also on the other two bills that we're dealing with, transportation, housing and urban development, and commerce, justice, state. We've had a vigorous debate over the past few days. We'll have further votes today, and I think we'll have further amendments today, but we look forward to our colleagues continuing to come to the floor and debate these amendments, and I hope we can continue to work together to produce a bipartisan piece of legislation that becomes the first appropriations bill as such that we have hopefully will be able to complete with the House, and I'd yield the floor.
Mr. President, what is the pending business?
The Gillibrand amendment is the pending amendment.
To H.R. 2112?
To H.R. 2112.
If there are no members on the floor seeking to either offer amendments or speak to those amendments, I would like to ask permission, consent to speak in morning business.
Is there objection? Without objection.
Mr. President, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle have an interesting grasp of history. How else can you explain their choice of this week to push for repeal of the most significant Wall Street reform since the Great Depression? For those who need a reminder, it was 24 years ago this week, October 19, 1987, that the Dow Jones Industrial Average suffered the largest one-day percentage drop in history. It was known as Black Monday. The Dow Jones lost 508 points that day, more than 22% of its value. $500 million in wealth destroyed in one day. It took the Dow Jones average 2 years to recover from Black Monday. Financial markets had not experienced such a disastrous decline since the stock market crash of 1929 that set off the Great Depression. Most of us thought we'd never again see such an event. Then came the financial crisis of 2008. In between time, I might mention there was a savings and loan crisis, but then came the 2008 financial crisis. 3 years after the near collapse of AIG set off the 2008 financial crisis, big banks and big Wall Street investment firms are once again extremely profitable. Most of the banks reported their earnings this week, and the biggest names made the biggest profits ever. Wall Street CEOs are still pulling down salaries and bonuses worth tens of millions of dollars a year, hundreds of times more than the average worker's income. Most Americans are still struggling. The financial crisis of 2008 wiped out millions of jobs. I recall the month that President Obama was sworn in as president. I stood there on that cold January day, and as he took his hand from the Bible, I realized we had lost 750,000 jobs the month he took office. And unfortunately, it preceded him and continued for some time. There are now 24 million Americans unemployed or underemployed. Millions have lost their homes. Millions more are in danger of joining them. Nearly 1 in every 4 mortgages in America is now underwater, which means that the owners owe more in the mortgage than the value of the home. In the last 4 years, many Americans have seen their home values plummet by nearly a third since 2007, and their retirement savings cut in half. We're paying a heavy price for the perfidy of Wall Street. Solid, well-run companies across America, many in business for decades, have been shaken to their core and can't find credit to either continue in business, expand their business, or hire new employees. What do our Republican friends offer as a solution? They want to repeal the reforms that Congress passed to reduce the reckless risk-taking and deception on Wall Street. They want to repeal Wall Street reform. They want to repeal Sarbanes-Oxley reform that was put in place after the debacle of the Enron Corporation. They are offering the same mistaken policies of the last decade, and they want us to repeat the same mistakes that led us to a near meltdown of the global economy. This effort to repeal Wall Street reform is part of a larger Republican campaign to prevent government from passing and enforcing reasonable rules that protect our environment and safeguard America's food supply, pharmaceuticals, and consumer products. Just cut taxes on millionaires and billionaires and get rid of government regulation, they argue, and the economy will just make a dramatic return. That's what they believe. But, Mr. President, if that were true, the last administration would have been the most prosperous in history. Those were the hallmarks of the George W. Bush administration. Wage two wars, don't pay for them, but cut taxes on the wealthy and try to diminish regulation when it came to oversight on the largest corporations, banks, and financial institutions. Instead, the George W. Bush administration produced, and I quote, "the worst jobs record on record." Those aren't my words. This is a quote from the Wall Street Journal. They said the Bush years produced the worst jobs record on record. And they followed the same playbook that the Republicans now offer as their idea for revitalizing the economy. During the Bush administration, we saw the largest tax cuts in our nation's history, with nearly all the benefits going to those at the top. It was the first time any president in the history of the United States cut taxes in the middle of a war. That's counterintuitive. A war is an added expense to government. Cutting revenue to government at that point invites deficits, which President Bush saw during his term, his 8 years. The debt of the United States doubled during President George W. Bush's term in office. Regulatory agencies were underfunded, overwhelmed, and they were represented many times by people who had no interest in their mission. In the financial services industry, many federal agencies turned a blind eye to activities that led to the global financial meltdown. The Securities and Exchange Commission under the Bush administration allowed America's largest financial institutions to self-regulate, police themselves. The Federal Reserve declined to use its power to regulate subprime mortgages, which led to the terrible housing crisis which we still face today. The Comptroller of the Currency used its power to preempt state consumer laws on subprime mortgages, exactly the opposite of what they should have done. Under the previous administration, unregulated mortgage brokers sold reckless loans, including infamous liar loans and ninja loans. Those were the loans, no income, no asset loans. Major financial institutions packaged the bad loans as securities, which they then sold as investments. Credit agencies blessed those toxic assets with AAA ratings while being paid by the very companies that were selling the loans. The fix was on. Insurance companies like AIG insured toxic assets against loss, turning junk into gold. Investors all over the world then bought those assets, sowing the seeds for the economic crisis we still suffer from today. It was a daisy chain of deregulation and disaster. And what do we hear from the Republican side of the aisle? Let's go back to those thrilling days of yesteryear. Let's repeal Wall Street reform. Let's let Wall Street, 10,000 flowers bloom, and we'll get back into a strong economy. America knows better. We've seen this movie. We know how it ended in 2007, and we don't want to see it again. This wasn't the first time. In the 1980s, savings and loans were deregulated, made reckless investments, and eventually had to be bailed out by taxpayers to the tune of $130 billion. $130 billion is bad enough. It was almost $800 billion for the TARP bailout of the big banks under the Bush administration. The Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Bill requires institutions that sell non-standard mortgages to keep at least 5% of those mortgages on their books, reducing the risk that they'll try to pass toxic assets off as solid investments. Under the new rules, banks have to make sure that borrowers can repay the loans. Lenders are forbidden from steering into expensive loans borrowers who can't qualify for more affordable mortgages. A new Consumer Financial Protection Bureau will look out for the interests of consumers and prohibit the sale of abusive mortgages and other risky and destructive financial products. I cannot think of another agency of government, not one, that the Republicans hate more than the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. I want to tell you, Mr. President, I'm proud that I introduced the first bill on this issue, and working with Elizabeth Warren, a Harvard Law professor. We put together a bill. I credit Senator Dodd and Congressman Frank for rewriting provisions and including it in Wall Street reform. And I think it's about time we had one agency, just one, in our federal government that was designed to look out and help consumers and families across America, to save them from the tricks and traps that are thrown at them which they couldn't possibly understand when you look at the fine print of their mortgage agreements and their credit card agreements and things that even lawyers struggle to understand. This one agency, one single agency, with the limited power given to it and the limited resources given to it, is the target. It's ground zero for the Republican attack. They do not want to have even one agency of government focusing on protecting America's consumers. The new Wall Street reforms tackle the dangerous problem of too big to fail. We saw what happened there. Almost $800 billion in bailout funds to the biggest banks in America. They, of course, had made some stupid decisions, greedy decisions, selfish decisions, and we paid for it. Everybody paid for it, with savings that were lost and pension plans diminished. And then, when they were about to fail, in came the previous administration and said, we have to save them or there'll be a global meltdown. Well, I was persuaded. I didn't want to see a global meltdown. And we gave some $800 billion to these big banks. Did they send us a note of thank you? Yes. They sent us a note of thank you, and they put it on the back of the most recent bonuses that they gave to their officers. Giving officers bonuses after the bank virtually fails and they have to rely on hardworking taxpayers to bail them out was the ultimate irony. But it's the reality of what we faced when we passed Wall Street reform. When Enron collapsed in 2002, shareholders lost between $11 billion and $60 billion. Employees lost $2.1 billion in pension plans. 5,600 jobs were destroyed, and Enron's top execs, whose recklessness and greed destroyed the company, received $1.4 billion in compensation. In 2007, after watching its stock value fall from $300 billion to $6 billion in 2 years, Citigroup pushed its CEO, Chuck Prince, out the door and incidentally gave him $38 million as a severance package. In late 2008, with the financial system on the verge of collapse, 17 troubled banks that had just accepted billions of dollars in taxpayer assistance doled out more than $2 billion in bonuses and other payments to their highest earners. Dodd-Frank, the Wall Street reform bill, reduces the incentives for CEOs to place short-term gains above long-term health of their companies by increasing transparency and giving shareholders some say over executive compensation. It's another way that the new Wall Street reforms can restore stability and integrity to our markets and sustainable growth for our economy. Mr. President, economists still debate the causes of Black Monday 24 years ago, but no one who looks honestly at our recent past can seriously debate what happens when you take the financial cops off the beat and let Wall Street and the big banks regulate themselves. Those who are calling for repeal of Wall Street reform are basically saying we are going to give free rein to Wall Street to make their own rules again. If they are successful, I predict, be prepared, it's coming at us again. Wall Street will overdo it, and their greed and their excess will eventually cost average families and taxpayers who have no fault in the process. We can't afford to repeat these mistakes that almost crashed the global economy. If our Republican colleagues want to join us in creating good, middle-class jobs for Americans, let them help us pass the American Jobs Act. And let me say one word about that, Mr. President. I know the Majority Leader is going to give the Republicans a chance to vote on one section of that today. I hope they'll join us. It's a section that takes part of the President's Jobs Act, some $35 billion, and uses it to hire those who would otherwise be laid off if they're teachers, firefighters, and policemen. 2/3 of school districts in Illinois have been laying off teachers. That's not good for the teachers, obviously. It isn't good for the students either. So we're trying to make sure we save these jobs and give our students a good education across America in these difficult times. When it comes to firefighters, we had a rally yesterday over in the Russell Caucus Room. A number of firefighters were there. And they're asking, of course, for a helping hand to save their jobs in this tough economy. I didn't know at the time of that rally, but Tuesday night in Moline, Illinois, the city council there took a look at their tough budget and decided to lay off 12 firefighters. These are the firefighters who are responsible for their ambulance service in Moline, Illinois. At that meeting, the fire chief, Ron Miller, stood up and said, I cannot in good conscience continue to be fire chief if you're going to take 12 of my firefighters away. This is not safe for the people of Moline, and he resigned. It was an act of principle, but it's an indication of how desperate people have become. The amendment we'll have today, part of the President's jobs package, will give us a chance on a competitive basis to fill many of these jobs for firefighters, policemen, and teachers. I hope that some of my Republican colleagues will join us in this effort. How do we pay for it, incidentally? There is a tax. Let's put it right on the table. It is a tax of 0.5% on the incomes of people making over $1 million a year. So the first $1 million is not subject to it. The next dollar is 0.5%. And the money that's brought in from that will spare hundreds of thousands of teachers, firefighters, and policemen from being laid off. I don't think it's too much to ask. The people who are wealthy and comfortable in America should share in the sacrifice with every other American family that sacrifices every day in this tough economy. This evening we'll have a vote on that, and I certainly hope we get bipartisan support. In the meantime, though, let's not repeal Wall Street reform. We learned a bitter lesson 24 years ago and just 4 years ago as well. Let's not repeat that bad history. I yield the floor. Suggest the absence of quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
Mr. President,
The senator from Maryland is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent that the call of the quorum be vacated.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I really want to compliment all senators and the way they've worked cooperatively on the expeditious way of moving these three very important appropriations subcommittee. Every senator who's had an amendment has worked with us constructively, either to modify them, to comply with what the leadership wanted to move the bill. I want to compliment the managers on the other side of the bill for also moving the bill, and I think it shows that we can govern ourselves. Mr. President, this is the first time in a couple of years we're actually following a regular order on due deliberations of our appropriations bills. It's very important that we do this not only to meet our fiscal responsibility of funding annual appropriations, that is actually putting money in the federal checkbook. We have followed a regular order by each subcommittee holding rigorous hearings, doing due diligence in terms of oversight, being quiet guardians of the purse. And now, if anyone watched us over the last couple of days, look, we've moved expeditiously. The debate has had intellectual rigor. It has civility. We've learned from each other. We've modified amendments back and forth. And I just think that this is so positive and so constructive. I hope we could conclude the deliberations on these three appropriations today. But again, if senators need to have their say, better they have their say and they have their day, and we show that we can govern in both a manner that is civil, has intellectual rigor, due diligence in terms of oversight. We are in a frugal environment, but also looking at how we protect vital American interest. The three bills that we have today are agriculture, so important to the American economy. This is a jobs bill, and it's also a food and drug safety bill. At the same time, it's transportation and housing. Wow. People talk about an infrastructure bank. Well, we don't know what we're going to do, and we don't know how we're going to pay for it. But right here today, we have transportation pending that will go to every state on a formula basis, and then some very important special needs identified by senators in this process to really then create jobs and meet the kind of needs in our structure, our respective states, to build or repair highways, build or repair bridges, have mass transit to get people to work, and at the same time be able to do housing. Housing is absolutely crucial to our economy. The federal government does own and operate housing. It's called public housing. The senator, the ranking member on the Transportation HUD bill, I know could speak eloquently about that. Maine is well known for its compassionate way of dealing with people with needs, whether it's elderly, whether it's the handicapped, whether it's the poor, but also how we can work with local government in the Community Development Block Grant, where local people make local decisions on how best to invest federal funds to have a multiplier effect in economic and community development. We don't only want to build housing, we want to build community in this country, and at the same time along the way to build jobs. This is fantastic. Then my own bill, the Commerce Justice Science Bill, which I've worked in such a cooperative way with the gentlelady from Texas, Senator Kay Bailey Hutchinson. We have the Commerce Committee. Now, the Commerce Committee is supposed to be about American business, and we have put money in there for the trade rep to make sure that we not only import, we want to make sure we just don't export jobs, but we export products made in America by Americans, helping the American economy. And we have also there the Patent Office. We've just reformed the process. If we want to out-innovate, we've got to protect our intellectual property. There are those who rather steal our ideas rather than invent their own. We have to have where if you invent it, you get to keep it and you get to profit from it. The National Institutes of Standards. This works with the private sector, a federal agency, to create the standards necessary that products can go beyond the prototype and be then sold in America, but because they're NIST certified standards, they can be sold around the world. Then we have the Justice Department. Wow. Aren't we proud of our federal law enforcement? Sure, BATF had a big spill on the cinders with their Fast and Furious program, but look at the FBI, look at the DEA, look at how they're intercepting everything from terrorists to organized crime to child molesters. And hey, let's hear it for the Marshal Service, often overlooked and undervalued, who are out there every day protecting those people who work in the courthouses, and also serving the warrants and keeping an eye on sexual predators. And then our subcommittee is one of the real engines of innovation through its work at the National Space Agency and also at the National Science Foundation, doing the kind of basic research that the private sector can't do, but will value add to invent, again, those new products that will be new jobs in America. So we like our bills, and again, we've done oversight to deal with how to be more frugal. And we hope, and we'll speak more to that as the day moves on. But I just wanted to give everybody the lay of the land. And for those senators who want to improve our bill by the regular order of an amendment process, we encourage them to come to the floor now, to offer them and speak out. We want them to have their say and to have their day. And, Mr. President, while we're waiting for those senators to come, I wish to comment on an amendment offered by our colleague from Virginia, Senator Webb. Senator Webb has been a long-standing advocate of the about people in our country being well served by the justice system. He has become increasingly concerned about the way the justice system works and feels that it needs a comprehensive review. He is recommending a commission to establish a National Justice Commission to do a review of federal, state, and local criminal justice systems, to make a final report recommending changes in policies, practices, and laws to both prevent, deter, and reduce crime and violence, and also to reduce recidivism and be doing this in a cost-effective way. I want my colleagues to know I'm an enthusiastic supporter of the Webb Criminal Justice Commission because it's a patchwork of it's just a patchwork now. And at times, because we so load up in the bottom end after a crime's committed, that we need to look at prevention and intervention and also other things like alternative sentencing. So I want to acknowledge the validity of the issue raised by our colleague from Virginia. You know, Mr. President, we have the highest incarceration rate of anybody around the world. Houses, well, not quite around the world. We have a very high incarceration rate. More than 2.3 million Americans are in prison. Another 5 million are on probation and parole. Correction costs continue to grow, and we have to tighten our belt. The problem is definitely evident in my bill. For federal prisons alone, we had to include another $300 million to safely guard the nation's growing federal prison population. That's not what's in state prisons and local jails. This subcommittee has an obligation to fund federal prisons, but this increase really did consume a significant part of our allocation at the expense of other DOJ agencies. This is why, and why? Partly because our Americans being more violent, more criminal, or are we just getting better at catching them and prosecuting them? You know what? The answer could be yes, but we really don't know. Or is it that our mandatory sentencing, a good intention, has now had unintended consequences, that people like who are first offenders or could be in alternative sentencing could be doing something else? We are spending a lot on prisons, and I support his effort to create a blue ribbon national commission to do an 18-month top-to-bottom review examining cost and practices and policies for prevention, intervention, and prosecution and imprisonment, looking at which programs work and can be improved. I hope that it will end in concrete wide-ranging reforms. I support his amendment, and I look forward to voting for it and then to working on a constructive way to take a look at what his recommendations are. I know the senator from Virginia is retiring, but I believe, along with his incredible service in terms of the national security of our country, this will be one of his more lasting legacies. So I hope we adopt the Webb Amendment, and, Mr. President, I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
On the screen, some tweets from members of Congress that you can follow that list as well at twitter.com/cspan. On the floor, a quorum call in the Senate as they have another day here of debate on 2012 spending. 3 spending bills rolled into one, the Agriculture, Commerce, Justice, and Science, and the Transportation HUD spending bill. We will see votes on amendments after noon and also a vote on the nomination of Heather Higginbottom to be Deputy Director of the Office of Management and Budget. Also possible as early as today is a vote on a portion of the President's jobs bill. Congressional Quarterly writing this morning that Senate Democrats are determined to take that vote on the jobs bill before the chamber leaves for a week-long recess. They write that after sending mixed signals over the past few days, Majority Leader Reid made it clear yesterday that the Senate would vote on one component of President Obama's larger jobs package this week, perhaps as late as Friday, instead of waiting another week. And they also say that test vote might occur today if a unanimous consent agreement is reached to hasten the process. Earlier on yesterday, Mitch McConnell had hinted that such an agreement might be in the works, saying that a vote on the jobs bill would apparently take place on Thursday. That jobs bill, a portion of the President's original plan, a $35 billion package.
While we're waiting for other senators to come to the floor to debate their amendment, I wish to comment on a pending amendment offered by the gentleman from Louisiana, Senator Vitter. It's his amendment number 769. It's an amendment to allow individuals to import FDA-approved drugs from Canada. Doesn't that sound terrific? I mean, doesn't that sound terrific? That maybe we could get cheap drugs coming into the United States through one of the greatest unguarded borders because of our wonderful relationship with Canada. But I must say to my colleagues, though it has a very good intention, and though senators have worked to modify it, I'm going to oppose it. Why? The reason I'm going to oppose it is that it could really jeopardize the health, safety, and even the lives of American citizens. Why? All of our work that we know from federal law enforcement, and as a member of the Intelligence Committee, we don't know if those drugs coming across the border are actually FDA-approved drugs. Not because Canada isn't a great country and works with us on the safety and security of what crosses our border, but because organized crime is now involved in the counterfeiting of drugs. You don't know what you're taking has been made in Canada, approved in Canada, and when it comes that it's a real website from a legitimate Canadian pharmacy. We could be importing death. Now, I'm not trying to be dramatic. I'm trying to outline the case. But before I go on, I note that the minority leader, the Republican leader, is here. I didn't know if he wished to speak. I'll be happy to withhold my comments and speak at a later time.
Let me thank my friend from Maryland. I would just speak as in my leader time, and
Mr. President, I'm going to yield what I was going to say because it can wait, and I'm happy to yield to the Republican leader for his leader time. I wish that what I've just said be stricken, and then I'll speak in a more coherent, cogent way on the Vitter Amendment later.
Without objection, the Republican leader is recognized.
Mr. President, the senator from Maryland always speaks in a coherent way. And let me just say, in order to further not interrupt her remarks, I ask consent that my remarks appear at the beginning of the day's journal in connection with my normal leader time.
Without objection.
Mr. President, as we all know, the number one issue on the minds of most Americans is jobs. And I think it's pretty clear that both parties are focused on that issue right now. I also think it's safe to say that two parties have a fundamentally different take on the solution. For Democrats, the solution apparently is to increase the number of people who work for the government. My good friend, the Majority Leader, made this pretty clear yesterday when he said that the private sector is, quote, doing just fine, end quote, and that the President's latest stimulus is focused on government jobs instead. Well, Republicans take a different view. We recognize that government has an important role to play. We recognize the need for common-sense regulations to ensure the safety of our citizens and the preservation of our resources. But it's become increasingly clear to many Americans that Democrats in Washington have lost all sense of balance when it comes to both the size and the scope of the federal government here in Washington. Based on the letters I get and the people I meet, there's a growing sense out there that government regulations are simply and completely out of control, and that this is one of the main reasons we're in this job crisis. And there's a growing sense that the reason for this is that lawmakers and bureaucrats here in Washington have completely lost touch, completely and totally lost touch with the struggles folks outside the Beltway are going through. I saw yesterday that the Washington, D.C. area now has the highest median income in the country. Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, the highest median income in the country. And I have no doubt that many of these people do good work. But the point is, they're weathering this economic downturn pretty well. Not only are they making big salaries relative to the private sector, they're also holding on to their jobs. The unemployment rate for the country as a whole is 9.1%. For government workers, it's about half that, 4.7%. So with all due respect to my friends on the other side, it's the private sector that's been begging for mercy. It's the private sector that's being crushed by regulators here in Washington. So I don't think the solution to the crisis is to make the federal government even bigger. When it comes to jobs, the primary role of government is to create an environment in which Americans and American businesses can grow and flourish without the heavy hand of government on their backs. We shouldn't be making it harder for people to do business and to prosper. We should be making it easier. Yet everywhere I go, from Silicon Valley to Kentucky coal mines, I hear the same thing. Get Washington off of our backs. They're killing us with all of these impossible demands. It's not the common sense regulations they complain about. It's all the new, burdensome, duplicative, and in some cases impossible to comply with regulations. I've got small business owners in Kentucky writing me to say that they're barely getting by as it is, and the EPA is harassing them with paperwork and threatening them with fines. I mentioned a paper company the other day in Ohio that's shutting down because the EPA demanded they upgrade their boilers with a technology that doesn't even exist yet. And I know my Democratic colleagues hear these same complaints, but because they're literally cut across party lines. One story I saw this week featured a Democratic mayor in Massachusetts telling Washington to back off. Here's a woman who went to the president's inauguration, an Obama supporter, stood in the cold to witness it with her kids. And now she says she's losing her faith in government because the overzealous enforcement of brutal new fishing regulations is destroying jobs and forcing smaller players out of the business altogether. Now, Democrats hear stories like this, too, and their solution is that we should hire even more people who wake up every morning thinking about yet new ways to regulate private industry like this until they cry uncle. Our view is that we should actually listen to what people are asking us to do and to help them out. Give them a break. It's time for government to help private sector job creators instead of looking for ways to punish them. So what we're doing is we're asking the Democrats to work with us on ways to help the private sector grow, because the fact is we're not going to get this economy going again by growing the government. It's the private sector that's ultimately going to drive this recovery. Look, if big government were the key to economic growth, then countries like Greece would be booming right now. If big government was the key to economic growth, Greece would be booming. What we need to do is to focus on helping the private sector grow. I know the Democratic plan is to focus on their government jobs bill instead, to punish private sector job creators with yet another tax to subsidize even more temporary government jobs at the state level. But what I'm saying is let's put the government stimulus bills aside for a change and do something for small businessmen and women in this country who are begging for mercy from their own government right here in Washington. Now, there's a lot we can do. As I noted yesterday, the House has already passed 3 pieces of legislation this year alone, one as recently as last week, that would send an entirely different message to businesses. Every one of these bills to roll back excessive regulations by bureaucrats here in Washington got solid bipartisan support in the House of Representatives. Last night, Senate Republicans also moved ahead on legislation that private contractors who do work for federal, state, and local governments have been asking us to enact as a way to protect jobs. At a time when so many businesses are struggling just to stay afloat, just to literally stay afloat, the government shouldn't burden them even more by taking money out of businesses that they could use to invest and hire. Now, the best thing about this proposal, not only is it bipartisan, it's also part of the President's bill. So here's another example of something we could do for job creators that we know will actually be signed into law. And there's no reason I can think of that this legislation shouldn't get 100 votes here in the Senate. A proposal supported by the President of the United States, passed with a large bipartisan majority in the House. Why don't we pass it? It's in the President's own bill, for goodness sake. The White House said yesterday that every part of the President's bill is equally important. If that's true, let's pass this measure. This legislation should get unanimous support. So let's vote on this and the other bipartisan jobs legislation I've mentioned, and then send them to the President for an actual signature, making a law instead of making a point. It's time we showed people who are really struggling out there that we're on their side, because right now I know a lot of them are having serious doubts. It's time we do something serious about jobs. And the proposal that I offered last night with the support of my Republican colleagues, supported by the President of the United States, passed by a bipartisan majority in the House, would be a good step in the right direction. Now, Mr. President, on another subject, the Senate Republican team is losing a key player today as we say goodbye to Lisa Wolski, the Chief of Staff to the Republican whip, Senator Kyl. Lisa's been a greatly valued advisor to me as well and to my entire team. We've always valued her intelligence, good strategic sense, and her sound judgment. She's worked extremely hard to make sure we always knew where the votes were, which is very important in this line of work. And most of all, we appreciate very much the fact that she's done all this with great team spirit. So I want to thank Lisa for her hard work for me and for the entire Republican team, and we wish her all the best in her future endeavors. And finally, Mr. President, on yet another subject, it is with sadness that I come to the floor today to commemorate a brave Kentuckian who lost his life in service to his country. U.S. Army Specialist Brandon S. Mullins of Owensboro, Kentucky, was killed on August 25, 2011, in Kandahar Province, Afghanistan, when insurgents attacked his vehicle with an improvised explosive device. He was 21 years old. For his heroic service, Specialist Mullins received several awards, medals, and decorations, including the Bronze Star Medal, the Purple Heart, the Army Good Conduct Medal, the National Defense Service Medal. The Afghanistan Campaign Medal with Bronze Service Star, the Global War on Terrorism Service Medal, the Army Service Ribbon, the Overseas Service Ribbon, the NATO Medal, and the Combat Infantryman Badge. Brandon Mullins inherited a proud military tradition. He was the third generation in his family to wear the nation's uniform. His father, Thomas, was a military police officer, and as a child, Brandon and his brother, Sean, loved to play with their dad's old MP mementos. They also loved to play on a World War II-era tank that was on display in a park near Brandon's childhood home. As a kid, Brandon loved sports. Hockey was his favorite. He and his family enjoyed going to Nashville Predators games, but Brandon's favorite team was the Detroit Red Wings. Brandon also played hockey in high school and was the MVP of his league. He thrived under pressure. One time, Brandon's team found itself in a shootout situation for victory in a high-stakes playoff game. Brandon asked his coach to put him in as a goalie. He wanted a chance to step up in a clutch moment for his teammates, and sure enough, his team won the game. Brandon also enjoyed being outdoors. He was a hunter, a fisherman, and a hiker. His family describes him as fearless when it came to physical challenges. He started rollerblading at the age of 4. He is remembered as high-spirited, generous, and very popular. Brandon's family was certainly not surprised when Brandon grew up and enlisted in the military. He wanted the tough job, his mother, Catherine, says. He wanted to fight. He was competitive. Brandon's brother, Sean, had enlisted before him, and so in February 2010, Brandon enlisted in the Army. He deployed to Afghanistan in May of 2011 with Company C, 3rd Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment, 1st Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 25th Infantry Division, based out of Fort Wainwright, Alaska. Once again, he thrived under pressure, this time in the demanding task of fighting for our country. Brandon matured very quickly, his father Thomas said. From the time he entered basic training, you could see a big change in his life. He was headed in the right direction with his life. Brandon loved being in the Army and would send letters back home about how cool basic training was. Brandon's fellow soldiers quickly took to the new recruit from Owensboro. I can honestly say I've never met anyone like Mullins, said Staff Sergeant Matthew Mills, Brandon's squad leader. Specialist DeRoderick Jackson, another one of Brandon's fellow soldiers, said this: "He was just a big help to me. Every time he saw I had a hard time, he made me smile and told me to get it together. On a mission with the Afghan National Army, I was real tired and they were going real fast, and Brandon said, 'You got this, brother.'" Another fellow soldier, Colonel Todd R. Wood, recalls that Brandon was best described as the epitome of selfless service. He took on details others did not want. He did not complain. He just did it, and usually with a smile. He carried the heaviest loads and helped out everyone he could. He was always concerned about others first. Brandon's fellow soldiers also recall he had a fun side. "I remember he was really goofy," said Private First Class Adam Baldridge. "One time I remember we got in trouble and we were getting smoked until we almost had a tear rolling down our cheeks. He just turned and looked at me and he said, 'Just remember, they can't smoke rocks.'" We are thinking of Brandon's loved ones today, Mr. President, as I recount his story from our colleagues in the Senate, including his parents, Thomas and Catherine Mullins, his brother, Private First Class Sean Eric Mullins, his sister Bethany Rose Mullins, and many other beloved family members and friends. This past September 11th was the 10th anniversary of the brutal terrorist attacks that ushered in a new era of military readiness and resolve for America. On that day, the Mullins family held a memorial service for Brandon. more than 800 people came out to show their respects. The funeral procession, led by 576 motorcycles, traveled from Good Shepherd Church to Owensboro Memorial Gardens at a slow, somber pace, taking 1 hour to drive 11 miles. On that day, Captain Sean L. Allred of the 3rd Battalion, 21st Infantry Regiment, wrote Thomas and Catherine Mullins a letter. I hope that through writing this letter you may know how your son lived as a warrior and will continue to live in our hearts and in our victories, he wrote. Know that your son was a brother to all men in his platoon and all who knew him. Brandon was a credit to you and how you raised him. I am forever indebted to him and will honor his memory in future actions. Captain Allred's sentiments are shared by this United States Senate. Our nation can never repay the debt owed to Specialist Mullins or the sacrifice he made that weighs so heavily on his family. But we can honor his service and ensure that he will never be forgotten by his country. It is thanks to heroes like Specialist Brandon S. Mullins that America enjoys the freedoms we do today. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland is recognized.
Mr. President, I do want to comment on the Vitter Amendment and then be able to have the gentlelady from New Hampshire speak. But before the leader leaves, I just want to express my condolences to the Mullins family for what happened. It's a little hard to get back into talking about amendments and debating issues when you hear such a poignant and wrenching story. But I'm glad the senator from Louisiana is on the floor because I know we'll be debating his amendment. I just want to make a comment about the Vitter Amendment 7699 as modified. I oppose the amendment. I appreciate the senator from Louisiana's intent to make lower cost drugs available to the American people. But we have many flashing lights about this, and I bring this from knowledge of being both on the Intelligence Committee and also in working with the FBI through our CJS in both the classified and unclassified setting. The amendment allows individuals to import FDA-approved drugs from Canada. It sounds great, but we don't know if the drug was made in Canada, and we don't know if it's coming from a regulated Canadian website. We are concerned that because of the organized crime involvement in now counterfeit drugs, lethal drugs could come into our country and have dire and devastating effects. We could talk about how to make drugs how to have pharmaceutical FDA-approved drugs available to our people at less cost. Ironically, this is coming from a national health system. I'm not going to get into Obamacare and all that, but I do want to speak as someone who knows a lot about international organized crime. And what I want our colleagues to know, that where there is compelling, compassionate human need, there's greed. And where there's greed, there's scams, schemes, and in many cases have lethal consequences. What the Vitter Amendment does, first of all, it doesn't give FDA additional resources to combat counterfeit medicine. It just makes an allowable use. I don't know where we're going to get the money. If our colleague Senator Cole were here, he would speak about the money. I want to speak about the safety. There are rogue Canadian pharmacy websites, rogue Canadian pharmacy websites. And the consequences of that is that we don't know what is coming. One of the things we do know is that we have examples of awful, awful kinds of things that happen. Do many of you remember when Coumadin came into this country? That is a blood thinner, and that it was illegally produced, did not meet FDA standards, and resulted in people dying because they hemorrhaged out because of a counterfeit drug. They bled to death taking something they thought was safe. There's Tamiflu that came into our country. It wasn't Tamiflu. It was talcum powder. Now, you might want to swallow talcum powder. It might give you indigestion, but I can tell you there are other things that could even have more dire circumstances. Birth control pills made out of rice flour. There is a complete list, and I would encourage you, go to the FDA, find out what they've experienced in this. Go to the FBI. Find out what they've done to try to intercept this. Go to our Customs and Border people. They have heartburn trying to prevent heartache from those things that could come illegally into our country. You know, we do have to deal with the cost of prescription drugs. We did deal with it in subsequent legislation in which we've closed the donut hole. I compliment the senator from Louisiana in wanting to do that and all who modified it. But I want to say, don't make a good intention have a horrible, lethal, unintended consequence. Mr. President, I yield the floor.